Yeah.
He says, I'll reform it. So he's going to New York, and he's looking for a witness of church or Christianity that speaks to your entire existence. Where, as he puts it, this is the language he uses, your whole being is under the gospel. Not just Sunday, not just church. I mean, not just weddings and funerals. Your whole being is under the gospel. And he finds that kind of witness in a black representation of Christianity, where one is the language of salvation includes not just life after death, but your daily bodily experience.
Hey, leuk dat je luistert naar de podcast Begrijpend Leven. We doen met elkaar nadenken over de vragen van jongvolwassenen rondom geloof, de Bijbel en de kerk. We gaan het vandaag hebben over niet zo'n leuk onderwerp. We gaan het hebben over oorlog. Hoe ga je als christen, jonggelovige, om met de dreiging van oorlog? En wat doe je als christen als het zover komt? We bespreken deze vragen langs het leven van Dietrich Bonhoeffer. En mocht je denken, wie is dat? Dat gaan we je vertellen. We doen dat vandaag met Reggie Williams en Henk Bakker. Reggie Williams is professor in de christelijke ethiek van de St. Louis University in Amerika. En als onderzoeker verbonden ook aan het International Baptist Theological Seminary, IBTS, in Amsterdam. Hij publiceert veel over ethiek, Afrikaanse, Amerikaanse studies, zwarte theologie. En hij staat echt bekend als een Bonhoeffer-expert in de Verenigde Staten. Hij is auteur van het boek Bonhoeffer's Black Jesus, Harlem Renaissance Theology en An Ethic of Resistance. Met andere woorden, het gaat ook over weerstand. We gaan het vandaag met hem hebben over Bonhoeffer. Ja, en Bonhoeffer is ook weer een beetje terug in de picture met een nieuwe film. In Amerika uitgekomen en het voorjaar in Nederland komt hij ook uit in bioscopen. En Bonhoeffer is voor veel christenen toch wel synoniem voor een theoloog die aan de goede kant van de oorlog stond. Maar wat kunnen wij vandaag van hem leren? Ik ga met Reggie in gesprek samen met Henk Bakker, mijn co-host voor vandaag. Henk is verbonden aan de Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, staat bekend als een Jezus-kenner. Dat is misschien een mooie omschrijving voor iedere gelovige, maar Henk heeft 2 boeken geschreven over Jezus. Het boek Jezus en recent is voor jou het boek Christus uitgekomen. Je kent Henk misschien nog wel uit onze allereerste podcastaflevering. We doen de podcast vanaf nu verder in het Engels. Als dat een probleem voor je is, maar je de boel toch wil volgen, kijk dan even op YouTube naar dezelfde podcast. Dan kun je door AI gegenereerde ondertiteling aanzetten en dan wordt alles duidelijk voor je. Dus we schakelen nu naar English. Reggie en Henk, full awesome, welkom.
Thank you.
In our podcast.
Thank
Good
you.
to have you here. We're going to talk a lot about Dietrich Bonhoeffer today.
Okay.
And let's say you're a young adult and you've never heard of Dietrich Bonhoeffer before. Reggie, what do you need to know about Bonhoeffer in a nutshell?
Well, some of the more popular things about him was he's a German who lived during the rise and fall of Nazism, though he never saw it fall, unfortunately. He was a German one of a small number of Germans who stood adamantly opposed to the Nazis. And this is something that a lot of people outside of Germany didn't recognize. There was resistance movements on the inside of Germany. But he was even a smaller number within the resistance movement as a Christian who wrote about resistance to the Nazis because of his Christian faith. Who was ultimately killed by the Nazis for his participation in a coup attempt that included an assassination attempt against Hitler. But he wasn't a part of the assassination attempt itself because he was already in prison when the assassination attempt happened. But he's, to even make it shorter, a German who stood opposed to Hitler, was implicated in an assassination attempt and was killed by the Nazis for that effort in 1945.
But you also mentioned he was within the resistance a small minority that because of his Christian faith stood up against the regime.
Yes, there's if you go to the Resistors Museum in Germany, the museum of people who resisted, there are a lot of people. It would seem like a lot of people, but it's not. But they name a bunch of people and the groups resisting, including young people movement.
Yeah.
And then there's a small display of Protestants. A very, very small display of Protestants.
Yeah.
He was one in a very small display of Protestants, like less than 1% of Christians who recognized the Nazi threat as a problem, as a Christian problem.
Yeah. In that way, he was sort of heroic Christian, of course. I want to add to that because I would recommend young people in Holland nowadays to read the prison letters of Bonhoeffer. And in particular, his letters written in 1944. And because here, and this is being recognized by many people, he sort of foresaw or prophesied about maybe our time. A time that young people would leave the church, for example, even older people leave the church. Secularization, but also where our hope is, because he was not against secularization, but he said, let us as a church go to people where they are. Don't build your temples and ask people to come, but your vocation is in the streets with people, with young people, and be with their mournings and sorrow. And I think this is a good message for young people nowadays. So,
read his prison letters from 1944.
You're talking about religionless Christianity, right?
Yeah, die Verwältigung der Kirche. The church must become more worldly. When I read this for the first time, my eyes almost popped out. Is this what he's saying? Should we be more worldly? But I'm a Christian. No. Be like Christ. He was worldly.
In the world. This is a theme that he speaks about in a number of places about Christianity as religionless. And that's what, to join in the sufferings of God in the world.
That's right.
So a lot of the questions regarding Bonhoeffer, regarding his stance in faith, has to do with his ethical views, so to say. Now, I can imagine if you're a young adult and you think ethics sounds kind of dull, maybe even boring, maybe the domain of paper philosophers. You both don't look to me as paper philosophers, but in a nutshell, how would you describe the ethics of Dietrich Bonhoeffer? And how would you describe ethics for yourself? I mean, what's your view on Bonhoeffer's ethics, Reggie?
So when we say ethics, it sounds complex.
Yeah.
But in fact, ethics is something that everybody has. Think of it as the way how we understand what it means to be moral. That's it. And then the study of how people come up with their understanding of moral is really what the study of ethics is. It's what ethics is. I often use ethics and morality as, ethics is the academic study of people understanding good, bad, right, and wrong in people and so on. So that's just one nut in a nutshell. Dietrich is doing this emphasis on morality that makes Jesus the central figure in it. Might say that we think of good, bad, right, and wrong. We have a set of principles that we have a set of principles that guide how we think about good, bad, right, or wrong. Dietrich would say that if you're holding on to principles, good, bad, right, and wrong, then you're satisfied about the kind of moral person, good person that you are in your mind. But it's actually when you meet another person that you have to think about good, bad, right, and wrong. He wants to have that be in your contact with someone. So say for example, might say giving money to a homeless person is bad because they're going to use it for drugs. Someone might say that. This is a principle that they live by. Then you meet that woman on the street with her child who genuinely has no money for food. If you hold on to your principle, then you will ignore a real need in front of you when life happens. He wants to have life be the way you read good, bad, right, and wrong. If that makes sense, because it is as he understands it. Jesus, you meet Jesus in every real life encounter.
So ethics happens, and it happens in the contact between people, and Christ is there.
And Christ is actually there in the contact you make with real life people.
How was that different from other Christian views of ethics in his time?
Well, there were views that, without getting into academic jargon, which I'm trying to avoid.
Thank you.
Academic jargon.
And I will add under that.
Yeah. Hey, Henk, do you want to just jump in there now?
Oh yeah. Just for a moment, just to tell a story that amazed me, because also psychological studies have been done on Bonhoeffer, and he suffered many times from severe depression.
Yes,
even long times, weeks and months. He visited, of course, Haarlem, and we'll go into details later.
Sure.
And there he saw this life ethics of people. And suddenly also the Sermon on the Mount became alive to him. When he went back, he was almost a restored man.
Yeah.
And he started doing his lectures in 1933 on Christology. But in fact, and this amazes me, he wrote 2 books. Gemeinsames Leben was foundational for him, of course.
Yes.
And here he's saying that ethics should be done with other Christians as a community.
So communal ethics.
Yes.
That's right. And he wrote on the Sermon on the Mount, on his ethics. And he turned into a non-violent preacher and teacher at the same time.
Yes.
So this visit to New York was groundbreaking for him and meant a restoration to him. So we look to Jesus and do the Sermon on the Mount, and we hold on together as a people of Christ. So the communal aspect also begins here for him.
Yeah. Does that mean, Reggie, that this new aspect for him of doing ethics in a Christian way, that was something that he did not discover in Germany, but he found out in Haarlem? I mean, you wrote a book about this.
Well, no. I would say this. His understanding of ethics came from the work that he was already doing.
Okay.
He wrote a dissertation, Sanctorum Communio was the name of it. He wrote a habilitation, which was required in the German Academy for Teaching. So he was a professor before he went to Haarlem. He qualified to be a professor. What happened in Haarlem was that theology became for him a part of a Christian life.
Right.
You might say that theology was academic for him before.
Yeah.
But then it became a part of a faith commitment. He would say later that he actually became a Christian.
Right. Was a second conversion almost.
It was like a conversion experience for him.
Almost like a first.
Yeah.
Well, so he may have had the first in Rome, when he was so much impressed of the church. There he visited this with his brother together. That's right.
Yeah, with Klaus, his older brother. He's very impressed with Rome. Interestingly, that you mentioned that, because in 1944, when he's in prison, again, back in the prison letters, and he's writing to his best friend, Eberhard Bethke, he says, I haven't changed much in my life, except for in two circumstances. One was the first impression of father's personality. His dad was a really big personality and a psychologist, in the head of the psychological wing of the Berlin University.
So he's high up there.
Yeah, he's high up there. It's not to say about his dad.
Right.
So on his first impression of father's personality, and then he says, after my first trip abroad, it was then that I changed from, and we translate phraseological to be abstract, ethereal, abstract, academic, to concrete, to real, to substantial. You might say.
Right.
I changed from the abstract to the concrete.
Yeah.
And there was some debate going on back and forth about this. About what was that first trip abroad? Was it Rome,
or was it
Haarlem, or was it New York?
Interesting.
And so in my work, I examine I examined the role of the trip to New York as the first trip abroad, the change for him. And it seems pretty clear that moment, like Henk was saying, was transitional. Now, you had asked a question earlier about how his ethics was different.
Yeah.
I want to come back to that.
Yeah.
There were many different views of what ethics should be, how people come up with their morality.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if your listeners will be familiar with rule-based ethics.
I hope so. Maybe you can explain for in a few sentences.
Rule-based ethics is you determine the rule that should apply to everyone, everywhere, all the time.
Yeah.
And you have a duty to act according to the rules that apply to everyone, everywhere, all the time.
Yeah.
You mean there's the Pflichtethiek of Kant?
Kant.
Yeah, that's right. It's Kant.
I know you know. This is one of the things I'm talking
I just want to be sure.
This the deontology. This is Kantian deontology. Yeah. So without the jargon, sorry, listeners.
No, that's fine.
But he mentions this several times, and he does not like that.
No.
Here's a classical dilemma for rule-based ethics.
Yeah.
And it's after his time that people refer to this example. Telling the truth is a rule in rule-based ethics.
Yeah.
Right? And treating people as an end in and of themselves, meaning something that they are valuable by themselves, not to be used to achieve something valuable.
No.
Lives are valuable.
Yeah.
Telling the truth is valuable. You're hiding Jews.
Yeah.
And then Nazis come and knock on your door. They ask, "Are you hiding Jews?" Now you have these are values in conflict.
Yeah.
Right? According to this understanding of ethics, truth telling is important, and saving lives are important. They're in conflict.
Yeah.
Dietrich would say that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You have no duty to Nazis. No responsibility for them at all. In such a case like that, you tell a robust lie to these folks whom you have no responsibility for in order to save these lives who you are responsible for. This is his Christ in the moment. And so it's different than Kant. And there's another one that I'll spare you the time. I won't explain that. But does that make sense?
Yeah,
that makes sense.
That does make sense to me. But Christ in the moment can also mean a lot of things. Can you elaborate a bit more about what happens with Christ in the moment?
Well, see, according to the rule-based thing, you are good in your mind because you're going to uphold a law that you believe is moral.
Yeah.
Regardless of the situation in front of you where you have lives that you're responsible for. Christ in the moment is the presence of these lives that you are caring for.
Yeah. Yeah. And in his ethics, it was later published, he goes into detail in these situations. This is called the pia fraus. You may lie, and it is good when you do so. Look, for example, at the first chapter of the book of Exodus. You see these two women helping their own people out. And they should, of course, commit murder almost. And were ordered to do so.
Yeah.
And they lie. They say, well, these children are already being born before it is doable. And so they lie. And Bonhoeffer says, under circumstances, and when Christ is there, this is allowed. Not only allowed, it's your duty.
It's your duty.
Which is a Kant word. He just totally flips it on his head. It's your duty to tell a robust lie in that moment in order to save these lives.
But the consequences can be dire because it is a sin. But God will forgive you this sin. This particular sin, not another sin. He will forgive you this sin.
So it's still a sin. Yeah. So let's connect the dots, and let's connect the dots a little bit towards a non-favorable subject, the looming of war in Europe, or maybe worldwide even. Let me introduce this a little bit to you, Reggie. In the Dutch mainstream media, there's been a lot of talks about war on the European continent almost weekly now. Also for young adults, also in the journals or the TV programs my children students are watching. So this is something that is looming on the horizon, especially when you're a young adult and you have your whole life in front of you. How did the ethics and the way Dietrich thought about ethics influence his thinking about war, about participating in war or not participating in war? I mean, he has an interesting life story in that regard.
Yeah. It's first, let me just acknowledge that such talk is terrifying. It's scary. We don't want nothing to do with that. No. We hope not, but unfortunately there are lots of things that are beyond our control. We find ourselves thrust into situations that we have no power over, yet we must still be faithful where we are at and with what we do have in our hands to do. That I want to acknowledge that first. He is 8 years old when World War I starts. He's 12 when it ends. 3 first cousins of his were killed in the war. I should mention that he is the youngest of 4 boys in his family, and he also has 4 sisters, so it's 8 siblings. Wow. His 2 oldest brothers go off to war. One of them comes back alive, and he's wounded. The second eldest, Walter, is killed. And if you know a family that's lost a child, it is devastating. The whole family is changed. Mom leaves home and doesn't stay there. Can't sleep there for a couple of weeks. And it's at that moment that Dietrich, in the wounds of war, immediately following it, at age 12, says, I'm going to be a theologian. So the war has changed him significantly. He trains as a theologian. I'm getting to the question here. He trains as a theologian after World War I. And in the while he's training as a theologian, he's thinking about his home, his country, family lost. In his in that period of time, and after he's finished his dissertation, training as a theologian, he says things like, "For the sake of loving my family, my people, war can be justified, murder can be sanctified, fighting for my people." Then he goes to Harlem. Yeah. He goes to New York. He has this transformation. And within the months that he comes back from New York, he says the Christian only prays for peace.
So he becomes a pacifist.
Yeah. Yes. But again, he doesn't like rules. It's not rule-based pacifism. It is what we call lifestyle pacifism.
Yeah. Character ethics, would you say?
Nachfolger, this is a book, Nachfolger. Yeah. Indeed.
Nachfolger, yeah. He writes in this, that's his... in English, we say discipleship. It's been translated as cost of discipleship.
Navolging in Dutch,
Nachfolger, yeah. But the Christian only prays for peace. The Christian is concerned for the well-being of your neighbor.
But his family says he was going almost out of his mind. What's going on with our son, with our brother-in-law?
Right.
They were puzzled. They were puzzled by him. Because it was it was a profound change, of course, in his mentality, and it was for some it was almost bordering to insanity.
Yeah.
How long was he in New York, in Harlem?
About a year.
About a year. Yeah. So they get Dietrich back as a pacifist.
But here McClendon says, if I may, who's
McClendon?
Jim McClendon, theologian.
If you're young adult, you don't know who Jim McClendon is.
An American theologian who died around 2000s. But he is very keen on having a non-violent ethics for Christians. Yeah. But here McClendon writes that he became untrue by, of course, going into the army, of course, as a double agent, we know, but that he was untrue to his principles, that when he came back from Harlem, because he was almost a collaborator, of course.
Well, see, now I would disagree with that a bit. I would disagree with that. Yeah. First of all, he doesn't have a principled ethics.
Right.
this is one thing that he doesn't. But he again paying close attention to what Christ requires of us in our encounter with each other.
Yeah.
The situation has gotten incredibly bad in Germany, and in consistent fashion for him. What does reality require of me?
Yeah.
The reality is the moment. What does reality require? Now, this is the situation that he's in.
Mm-hmm.
He's not in the army. He's in what's the German version of the CIA. He's got access to all of this information.
Mm-hmm.
They're murdering. Mm-hmm. They're doing a lot of murdering. They become a juggernaut of power.
Yeah.
You know this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
You know they're murdering people. To do nothing is to be guilty.
Yeah.
To act when the government has become a juggernaut of power
Mm-hmm.
is to become guilty.
Yeah.
What does the Christian do?
Yeah.
There is no space to stand on that is not mired or dirty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What were we talking about? About to tell the truth?
Mm-hmm.
When the Nazis are coming knocking at your door, what are you telling? If you tell the truth, you are dirty and guilty. Right. If you tell a lie, you are guilty.
Yes.
To act here then is to throw oneself on the mercy of God.
Indeed, indeed.
And he says this: everyone who acts responsibly becomes guilty.
And
his
you
words.
becomes also responsible for your own sin, and that's, I think, so important.
Yes.
Because we will always have, via left, via right, dirty hands.
This, yes, especially in the song. But I do want to hold that moment, what he was in a separate category. We have no idea.
That's
the immense trauma, the enormity of that moment that he was in. We've not experienced anything like that. So that was a unique situation, but it was also consistent for us, I would say, as people who are learning from him.
Yeah.
That a principled life oftentimes can cause you to be, and this is something that he didn't like at all either, very self-focused.
Yeah.
This is the thing about a principled life. You're very, very insular, very self-focused. In his one of the books that he wrote.
Mm-hmm. So you want to keep clean hands.
You want to, your effort to keep clean hands makes you simply a self-centered person.
Right.
And one of the books that he wrote is a collection of essays called Creation and Fall.
Mm-hmm.
He's talking about good and bad again here. And he says that the fall from grace, the fall from in the Garden of Eden was the creature, human, thinking about becoming a moral individual. Prior to the moment where after the fall, the human beings are thinking about themselves with the knowledge of good and evil.
Right.
Prior to that, there was relationship.
Yeah.
Seamless relationship with God and with other people and with creation. We have moved from the ability to actually connect with each other into thinking about myself as a good person.
Yeah.
I think I understand.
That is sin.
I think I understand. But how in Dietrich's life were his time in Haarlem, how did that influence? I understand it influenced his theology and his thinking about ethics, but how did it influence his prospect on war?
Yeah, for several ways here. First, talking about how it influenced him as a Christian. Before he went to Harlem, to New York, the experience of church, and we might say piety, was compartmentalized. Church itself, and this is one of the things when he told his family at 12 he wanted to be a Christian, and he wanted to be a theologian, they said, church is bourgeois. And it's only for the upper elite of society. In the upper elite of society, they'll have weddings there. They'll have funerals. They'll go through catechism where they'll train their kids on Bible type stuff. Right. But it's only it's compartmentalized. It doesn't have anything to say about suffering, about everyday life. It doesn't speak to everyday life. It's compartmentalized. Bourgeois.
Yeah.
He says, I'll reform it. So he's going to New York, and he's looking for a witness of church or Christianity that speaks to your entire existence. Where, as he puts it, this is the language he uses, your whole being is under the gospel. Not just Sunday, not just church. I mean, not just weddings and funerals. Your whole being is under the gospel. And he finds that kind of witness in a black representation of Christianity, where one is the language of salvation includes not just life after death, but your daily bodily experience, where you are praying for your safety, for, this is a community of people who knew things like persecution from political situation.
It was an Ethiopian church, wasn't it?
It had
Abyssinian.
Abyssinian had the name is as Ethiopian, but and they had a relationship with Ethiopian Christians.
And he served there as well, didn't he?
He served,
Bible classes he gave? Or?
He did he did Bible study, Sunday school for boys, and midweek Bible study for women. He was giving out food. Now I should say this. If I use the language of social gospel, what I mean is a Christian witness that says sin is in society as well as the individual. So the way we structure who gets health care,
right?
Who gets education, who gets a fair living wage. Black people in the United States know the experience of not getting a living wage, of not getting access to food and health care. What does salvation mean to a people who can't say that they even own their own bodies? What does salvation mean for people who don't know where their next meal is coming from for sure? This is the history of a people oppressed. And they cry out to God for salvation. So their entire being is under the gospel. This is the church that he enters. He sees a witness that says, we rely on God for everything, Monday through Sunday. And that is where the transition for him comes.
So it's a total and lived, enriched experience of seeing Christ in everything, but also needing Christ in everything.
Yes.
Not just on a Sunday, but on every aspect of life.
Every aspect of life.
How, and that's really interesting to know, how did it influence his reading of Scripture, for instance? Because we know now, he was part of, you mentioned this at the beginning, a very small part of the resistance. But also the resistance wasn't very big in Germany. Protestants, most Protestants just marched with Hitler, so to say. How did Bonhoeffer read his Bible with this in mind? Any different than most of the other people in his time who also read the same Bible?
Well, there's another figure here in New York. So he's got the Harlem church community, right? The black church community. And he made a friend with a Frenchman in seminary who was a pastor in France. Now, the Germans and the French didn't get along at all. So he meets Lasserre, and he's Jean Lasserre is his Frenchman's name, as a new student at Union at the same time with him. And he immediately doesn't like him, right, because of French. But they strike up a friendship, and they become very, very close. Jean Lasserre is a pacifist pastor in France. Jean Lasserre is emphasizing the Sermon on the Mount is not stuff for us to ignore. One of the ways that people read the Sermon on the Mount is it's hard sayings and high ideals. Meaning it's speaking things that you're meant that are meant to show you that you can't do what God wants. You have to just rely on grace. These are
so
really
you don't have to do anything with the Sermon on the Mount because, well, or you go the evangelical way and you say, well, Christ did everything for you, so you don't have to.
Jesus paid it all, so I don't have to.
Exactly.
So it's that this is an interpretation of it. It's hard sayings and high ideals. Lasserre is saying no.
That's right.
It's not hard sayings and high ideals. We're meant to obey that. Now, in his dissertation, he and in some of his lectures prior to New York, he's saying something similar. Remember what we were talking about principles? That the Sermon on the Mount becomes principles.
Yeah.
And we're not to be living according to principles. We're living according to the dynamic day-to-day. This is what he's saying.
Yeah.
He meets Lasserre while he's experiencing a Christian faith that places the whole being under the gospel. Then things are changing for him.
Yeah.
Now he's thinking, well, wow, maybe there's something to this Sermon on the Mount. Once I see a Christian faith where my entire being is under the gospel. He comes back from New York and he's asking, does the church provide us with content that we are meant to obey? A church that is a church with a faith witness that is involved in every aspect of your life. Does it include stuff that we're supposed to? I mean, can the church say something that we're supposed to do?
Yeah.
And this is a real question for him. So now he's paying attention to the Sermon on the Mount, and what I just mentioned about creation and fall, that book, that is a set of lectures on Genesis 1 through 3.
Yeah.
I mean, he takes this hard section, right? Genesis, and he turns it into guidance, Christian guidance for daily life.
There's a profound difference indeed between his dissertation, Communio Sanctorum, and Gemeinsames Leben. By the way, this exposure to what he saw in New York helped him to build an ideal of an educational system as Finkenwalde.
Right.
This is also Gemeinsames Leben, but then, of course, under his own hands. And it was also forbidden. And here pastors were trained that were already pastored and trained by German education, German university.
So it was a post-university study center for the church who didn't belong to the Hitler-oriented churches, right? Am I saying this correctly?
Yeah.
You just broke that down very quickly.
Okay.
Very, very well done.
Okay. Well, let's. We have
Finkenwalde was an experiment, of course.
Yeah,
but it was very fruitful.
If, let's say, you're a young adult living today, and you've heard everything we've talked about Bonhoeffer today, and you're like, well, maybe I don't have a life that's connecting all the dots of Christianity. Maybe I'm not so sure about the Sermon on the Mount being in a daily life. Maybe I don't experience Jesus in every conversation, every interaction I'm having. Maybe I'm also a little bit set on rules. What would your suggestions be if you want to explore this kind of thinking any further? Well, this is a hard one, but
it could be. It could be. I would start by saying you're not supposed to be Dietrich Bonhoeffer. No one. You be yourself. Our responsibility is to ask the question: who is Christ for me today? In your context, in your situation, the place where you find yourself as you're sitting listening to this, in the community that you find yourself, what does God want from you? And to be serious about that.
But to be honest, Reggie, that almost sounds a little bit individualistic as well.
A little what?
Individualistic as well.
If you are to be asking the question, what does God want from you? That is not individualistic, because where you are at includes the land and the community in which you are embedded at the moment.
Yeah.
And that is the question we must face. We must ask. How are you embedded in the community that you are in a way that is faithful to Christ's reality?
Thank you. Would you agree, Henk?
Yes, I concur. I completely agree. And I would, and to make the circle around, end with what I started with. In one of his final prison letters, Bonhoeffer says to his friend, don't worry about what I'm going through. if you would worry about something, worry about my concepts of Christ. So under high pressure, his ideas concerning Christ were changing. Mm-hmm. And I think this is where we should start. Reach out to Christ, who he is, where he is, in Scripture, in the church. And then from there nourish, of course, on both these titles. Communal life, gemeinsames Leben, and Nachfolger, be a follower of Christ. So be true to your heart. But please be focused on who Jesus Christ is. Because he was the Lord of Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And we are not Bonhoeffer. But the same Lord reaches out to us.
Amen. I'd like to add as well that he didn't figure it out completely.
Yeah.
He made plenty of mistakes.
He was 39.
Yes, he was 39 when he was killed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he, as Henk was saying, struggled with depression. He also doubted himself regularly. Can I read to your listeners something here?
Yeah.
Great.
This is something that he wrote in prison. And he was struggling with the decisions that he made that got him there as well. And what is wrong with Christians that we can't see evil as it's looking us right in the face, so forth. This is a poem that he wrote. It's a prayer. It's called Who Am I? Who am I? They often tell me I would step from my cell's confinement calmly, cheerfully, firmly, like a country squire from his country house. Who am I? They often tell me I would talk to my warders freely and friendly and clearly, as though it were mine to command. Who am I? They also tell me I would bear the days of misfortune equably, smilingly, proudly, like one accustomed to win. Am I then really all that which other men tell of? Or am I only what I know of myself, restless and longing and sick like a bird in a cage, struggling for breath as though hands were compressing my throat, yearning for colors, for flowers, for the voices of birds, thirsting for words of kindness, for neighborliness, trembling with anger at despotisms and petty humiliation, tossing in expectation of great events, powerlessly trembling for friends at an infinite distance, weary and empty at praying, at thinking, at making, faint and ready to say farewell to it all. Who am I? This or the other? Am I one person today and tomorrow another? Am I both at once? A hypocrite before others? And before myself, a contemptibly woebegone weakling? Or is something within me still like a beaten army, fleeing in disorder from victory already achieved? Who am I? They mock me, these lonely questions of mine. Whoever I am, thou knowest, O God. I am thine.
That's beautiful. Thank you very much. I think that's a great conclusion to everything we've talked about now and today. Thanks very much, Reggie, for your input, for your thinking, for your research on Bonhoeffer and everything else you do on ethics as well. Yeah. If people want to read more about you, where can they Google you, find you?
You know, if you just Google my name with my middle initial, there's a lot of stuff that come up. And Reggie L. Williams.
Okay, because else you meet the basketball player.
But unfortunately, he doesn't have the theology.
We got the right one, at least in our podcast.
If you just Google Reggie L. Williams, you'll find a bunch of stuff about
All right, I'll put it in the show notes. Thank you very much. Thank you as well, Henk. En jij ook heel hartelijk dank voor het luisteren. Deze podcast is een project van de Maatschappij van Welstand en Unie en ABC. Mocht je meer over ons willen weten, kun je kijken naar onze social media kanalen, waar we momenteel vooral op Instagram en op TikTok actief zijn. Grote dank voor het luisteren en tot de volgende keer. Hoi.